Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the webinar where we are going to talk about AI with Business Central and beyond. We are going to cover in this webinar how businesses can leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning, and they can start this journey using their ERP, which could either be a NAV or a Business Central, and they can take a leap towards leveraging from AI and machine learning to identify and solve their business problems. With this, I just want to invite Sanjeev, who's going to lead this webinar for us. Sanjeev, why don't you introduce yourself and we can begin?
Hello, everybody. This is Sanjeev here. So I'm basically from the IT world. I have close to 27 years in information technology, and for the last 10 years, I have been involved in artificial intelligence and IoT. So I'm going to lead this presentation, and I'll be supported by Deepak, who comes from the Microsoft Business Central world. Deepak, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. This is Deepak Kumar, and I am expert in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. So,
thanks, Deepak. All right. So before I begin, I think just want to tell you that at Olitech, we've been working on several AI and machine learning projects and assignments. So we have close to 25 successful implementations of AI, ranging from industries including e-commerce, retail, manufacturing, life sciences, healthcare, consumer electronics, insurance, pharmaceutical, energy, and different other industries. Some of the problems we have solved include clustering, segmentation analysis, predictive analytics, and then going into unstructured world of images, natural language processing, and there's a lot of hype about AI and machine learning. I know that today almost everybody keeps talking about artificial intelligence. But I think what we're going to talk about today are some real industry experiences, that we have had, and we'll especially try to focus on, what Microsoft has to offer, so we'll try to give a flavor of Microsoft, to our in our examples, So I think before we really begin, I think it all starts from from our own imagination. It's about us imagining, what AI can do for us. And, as humans, we all know that, we are so good at imagination. So I would really encourage you, all of us and all of you to start imagining, what AI could possibly offer to you, And, what I will do is I'll start by imagining something for you, and take you through a story, of how AI can help you in your business. So so maybe you could imagine that every prospect that you approach out there in the market, becomes a happy customer for you, So on the customer acquisition side, it's a very big statement. Some of us who have worked in sales and pre-sales, we know that how tough it is to convert a prospect to a customer, and the conversions could be as abysmal or as low as 1 in 10 at times. But then I think what would be really fantastic is if we were to convert, let's say, 1 out of every 2 prospects into a customer. Now the key thing is that how do you do it? So obviously there are so many different ingredients to converting a prospect into a customer. One obviously is that, do you have the right offer in place so that it really entices the customer? And the other key ingredient would certainly be if you're prospecting the right customers, and therefore, whatever you have to sell, I'm sure you would have great products to sell, but if you are not approaching the right customer, it's very likely that, you may not succeed. So certainly, this is one of the imaginations you could have, that could AI help me convert, more and more prospects into customers, So let's take our imagination further, and, think about, you've got the customer, what more you could think of, So imagine that, every item that you produce or you have to offer, actually gets sold in the market, So again, this is a very big statement, So we already imagined that every prospect becomes a customer, and on top of it, if you were to actually sell everything that you produce, then obviously you would have fantastic business, going forward, what more could you really ask, if you have prospected well and, produced well and you've sold everything in the market, Uh, but I think there's one more thing you could possibly imagine, and that is, it's also about, actually recovering cash from the market, So I think another thing you could think of, imagine is that all the monies that you deserve from your customers or from your, partners actually gets recorded and paid to you, We know that cash is king, cash recovery is key to ultimate success in business, We need cash because, we can reinvest it as working capital, or, we could disperse more dividends to shareholders and therefore can increase the valuation of our companies, So certainly, this is also a very key ingredient of any business success. So in a perfect world, you could imagine that, you're prospecting right and winning new business at a very high velocity, so very efficient in customer acquisition. You're producing and delivering just the right items. And so your fulfillment is working almost 100%, and you are recovering cash from the market, and therefore you have a super efficient, high discipline in high fiscal discipline, So you could really imagine, that AI is actually improving, or helping you across your entire business, right from customer acquisition to demand planning to fiscal discipline. So all right, I think we have set some context or set some imagination, for what we think, AI could or should do for you, just as a idea, that what you could think of doing with AI for your business. So another thing, I think, before we really move forward, it would be really important to explain what is AI, and I won't take much long. I'm sure you would have read about it, and you would have, participated in many different seminars where, they would have talked about AI, but I think it's still important to touch upon it. So when we talk about AI, essentially we're talking about cognitive science. We're talking about experiential learning, So we are looking at essentially cause and effect, So we're looking at causality. We are talking about what are those reasons, when we have fantastic business outcomes, and what are those reasons when we actually fail in achieving our business outcomes, So the key fundamental building blocks of AI are essentially based on cognitive science. It's based on us humans, So when we talk about humans, we're talking about our senses, our brain, and our actuation part, which really makes us intelligent being, So in the context of an AI technology, there are basically 5 pillars to AI. So one is, of course, the core data science and machine learning. In this, we talk about, unsupervised learning, where, we try to look at the data and we try to We try to cluster and segment it and have great, fantastic insights from our data. And the second part is doing predictive analytics, which is essentially what I talked about as causality or cause and effect. When we think about the senses, one sense we have as a human is the image, ability to understand from images. So image recognition is a key pillar or a key building block of AI, and essentially looking at images and recognizing images. And here, we would use things like deep learning, convolutional neural networks, or if we could be using computer vision libraries like OpenCV, or some of the APIs which are available from Google or Microsoft or Amazon. The third pillar or another key sense we humans have is about ability to understand language, and natural language processing is one of the key pillars. And again here we would use deep learning models like the RNNs, sequence to sequence, or LSTM models, and we would use different NLP techniques. Bots is another key pillar of AI. Essentially, bots are conversational agents, which could be either chat bots or voice bots. And then IoT, IoT is essentially, Internet of Things. So there are two key clear areas for IoT. One is industrial IoT, where we would use, different sensor devices, and we would implement something like MQTT broker, and we would get live feeds from the ground, from our manufacturing plants or other areas, or it could also be body-worn devices, So one thing I would like to just mention, if some of you are from the traditional IT world, AI is less about coding, it's more about training models on data, and this data is mostly the historical data, and that's why we call it's based on cognitive science and experiential learning, So imagine that, our brain is always getting, continuously getting trained on new data, and on similar lines, AI models are being trained on continuous data which is coming into your business, and we are creating an experiential learning experience. Another important question that you might have is that where exactly does AI fit into my IT infrastructure? So what you see here is a typical architecture of an AI application. So you would have your normal, you may be aware of most of these items in the presentation layer. So you would have a custom client like a web interface or a mobile application, or you could have something like Microsoft Dynamics ERP, where you would have some customized screens to show, to do something, on a business side. Or there could be some custom reporting program that you could build with Power BI or Tableau or QlikSense, So that's the presentation layer. On the foundation layer, we have, what you would already have, it would be the normal OS components and, your relational databases like SQL Server. And then, the foundation components like, either the .NET framework or the Java framework, J2EE. And then there are two additional components here. One is, Python and R, which would help you build your machine learning models. But the key layer in here is the artificial intelligence layer, which sits between the presentation and the foundation layer. And here what we present is, you could do AI, especially in the context of Microsoft technologies, using Microsoft Azure, Machine Learning Studio, ML Studio, or you could alternatively also use open source, so build your models with Python, so you could build Python ML models and expose those models, into RESTful APIs, using Python Flask API or a Django application, To complete the picture, I think it's important to understand that, when we talk about machine learning and AI, it's not just about internal data, it's also about external data and external interfaces. So imagine that, you're trying to predict your demand, and that demand is also based on not just on your historical demand, but also on how the weather pattern, which could be an external interface or an external data that you would pull into your solution, and the AI layer will actually synthesize this external data with the internal data to produce some interesting outputs and result. So having talked about what AI is and how it fits into your IT landscape, I think let's go back to the original imagination of this perfect world. And we talked about customer acquisition and demand planning and fiscal. Our first interesting example of a very large business to business B2B online retailer. Now the problem for this customer of ours was that they had almost 5 million prospective customers, but they only had a handful of salespeople, and they wanted to really know how they can increase their conversion or the customer acquisition, given that they have a limited sales bandwidth. So what we really did was we applied unsupervised learning approach to profile their customers better and identify the ones who are very likely to buy their services. So essentially, we help them profile their customer very, very precisely so that they get high success in the market. So what you see here is also the approach we took to do this assignment. So we took about 2 weeks to assess the problem, and understand their data in much detail. And then we transformed the data, extracting the relevant fields, and then we applied the unsupervised learning models on that to build segments and clusters. And those results were then used to do predictive analytics, which eventually gave them a high level of predictability on their sales. So what you see here on the screen are the actual implementation of this solution. So what you see, the top left box is showing the unsupervised learning approach. So we essentially took the demand data and the supply data, and we transformed that data into RFM measures. So RFM stands for recency, frequency, and monetary value. So according to this customer, a fantastic customer for them would be one where there is high demand, high supply, and very low churn. So as just to remind you of their business, they are a B2B trading company. So their customers are suppliers who are listed on their portal, and they want their suppliers to pay subscription to them on an ongoing basis, and therefore they certainly are looking for low churn, but then they are looking for those areas which have high demand and high supply. So having transformed the data into RFM measures, we applied unsupervised learning models and clustering techniques. So we applied k-means, and what you see, the bottom right, where you see a graph, so that's the elbow graph, which tells that by applying clustering, how many ideal number of clusters their data has got. So what we found was that ideally there should be 5 clusters in their suppliers, and the bottom left is the actual result of the segmentation analysis, and this result can clearly tell you that the clusters 0 and 4 have got very high demand and supply. If you were to look at from a measure of 1 to 5, we are talking about demand in the range of 4 to 5 and supply in the range of 4 to 5, and churn being very low, like 1.92 and 2.01. And then, the cluster number ID number 2 is a cold segment, with very low demand and low supply but very high churn. So you can imagine what this kind of an analysis would have done for this customer of ours. They completely stopped selling to suppliers in the cold segment, which freed up their sales money, and they focused all their efforts onto the hot segment suppliers, where they had a maximum chance of converting them into paid suppliers, And all in all, this led to almost 15% improvement in their customer acquisition, basis the analysis that we did, and all because of application of artificial intelligence, especially unsupervised learning on their data. So that's an example of how AI could help improve your sales. Now let's get to the second use case, and this is about improving delivery efficiency. So the example here is about a mid-sized trading company, and and the use case is about being able to predict uh, late deliveries. So on one hand we have the production, and but then the produced goods have to be delivered on time, and so the problem statement here is to forecast late deliveries, and here's an example, where we have a full integration with Microsoft Business Central, uh, so the data comprised of all the different characteristics of a shipment, which would be what is being shipped, the nature of goods, volume, weight, etc. From where to where it is being shipped, at what time, and then who's delivering it, who are the vendors who are delivering this, and how, they could be like on road or by air, and whether the shipment reached on time. So, when we talk about cognitive science and supervised learning models, we need to have a lot of historical data of, shipments done in the past, and if we have lots of records, with these inputs and outputs, then we can train our models, and, those trained models can actually predict in real time when a new shipment is being made, whether that shipment would reach on time or not. So what you see here is, we basically took the Business Central historical data and integrated it with the Azure Machine Learning Studio, ML Studio. So the historical data is fed into the Azure ML Studio, where we train the models, and then those trained models are used to predict the chances of a shipment being delayed or on time, um, uh, on a real shipment, and we embedded the so the results are shown in Power BI, and then they are embedded in Business Central. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly switch to the actual demonstration of the solution. So what you see here is actually a Business Central screen, and so we're showing the customer shipment history, and we'll just pick one of the customers, so let's see, we'll just pick one of the customers. So first thing I think we have to do is to train our model. So what you see on the top menu bar is a button called train. So when you click this button, the historical shipment data is actually fed from Business Central into Azure ML Studio, and the models get trained. So here's what we've just clicked the train button, and what it has actually done is it has sent this data, to Azure ML Studio. Can we just quickly show if there's a Azure ML Studio? And okay, sure. I think let's go back to Business Central then. No worries. Yeah, so essentially when you click that train button, it came the results came back, that the models have been trained and with a 96% confidence level or accuracy. So essentially what accuracy mean here is, the evaluation of the models, and when it says quality is 96%, it's basically one of the evaluation score for a classification model which we call the F1 score. So now having trained the ML model, now we would actually like to use this trained model which is sitting on Azure ML Studio to predict for an actual shipment, whether it will be made on time. So we'll just pick one customer maybe and one order. So let's open one customer and an order. All right, so what we see here is a customer of this company, the device shop, and we are looking at an order number 1003. Now this order has got two line items, so one is item number 80,001 and the other one is 766 BC/C. So one is a computer and another one is something else. So what we can do is, we can pick, we can predict the shipment delay, by taking this option, predict shipment, and what it should be doing is it should be predicting, it will invoke an API which runs on the Azure ML Studio, which returns the prediction on whether the shipment will be made on time. And so what we will see is, that what is the chances that the shipment will be on time or delayed. So what this has predicted is that, item number 80001 is likely to be late, and we are able to say that with a prediction confidence of almost 96%. And for the other item, 766 BC, it's very likely that this will be on time and with a prediction confidence of 94%. So essentially, what we have shown to you is, how with Business Central and machine learning, we can actually predict shipment delivery and any other outcome, which we could consider. I hope that you're able to see the presentation back. So what we really demonstrated here was how, our Business Central application can leverage the power of AI, and here we have integrated the Business Central with Azure ML Studio to predict late shipment deliveries, for a given sales order. Let's move to the next wish list item we had on our table, and that was about, in our perfect world, we also are looking to get paid on time, or rather, have a very high level of fiscal discipline as we run our business. So the example we have picked here is for a large logistics customer of ours, who have close to 100 suppliers and vendors, and every month, as they do their month end closure, they end up calculating monthly accruals. So they end up calculating what should be posted for each of the vendor, what is the expected outflow of cash that they would have for a given vendor. And when we talk about a vendor, sometimes a vendor is not just one invoice. Think about a vendor like a electricity supply company, and you could have 100 electricity meters across all your offices or business establishment, or 1000 meters, and each meter, electricity meter would have its own invoice attached to it. So essentially, calculating accrual amount on a monthly basis, even for 100 suppliers, could be a much bigger problem, than you can actually think of. And as we said, cash is king in business. And if you can really do your accruals right, you might end up having more cash on your books, and that cash gets available to your business. And of course, if you have more cash available in your business, it helps you achieve more. There was a study, which said that even having 10% more accuracy in your accruals could have a ripple effect on your business, which could give you, which could give you gains of more than 30%, in your business, because obviously we're talking about that money being invested in business, or rather being used for different business operations. So in this, for this customer, we applied supervised learning approach to enhance the accuracy of forecasted accrual amounts. So what you see here is a flow chart of what we really did. So we took the past vendor invoices for last 3 years. We did some feature extraction from that and got a feature-rich invoice data on which we trained our machine learning models. And that machine learning model essentially predicts the current month's accrual amount, and you keep doing this on a month basis for each vendor, and within each vendor, different cost heads, and you really end up doing, a mammoth task, but then quite automatically, So the way I think the process I already explained to you, but we're going to show you, on Business Central, how did we go about doing it. So when we talk about financial application in Microsoft Dynamics and Business Central, so we talk about the chart of accounts, um, so we'll pick one vendor, and and that's basically a power distribution company. And for that power distribution company, we'll pick one electricity meter, and we will show how we can use AI, especially Azure ML Studio, to predict what should be the accrual amount for the current month. So let's see what the input is first. Okay, so we have run the accruals prediction process, and we can show you what was the input and what's the output. So we're going to see the general journal and see, our inputs and outputs there, So essentially, what this has done is this has predicted that for the month of month of October, it has predicted that the expected accrual amount, or the expected invoice from this electricity utility company for this electricity meter is of the value of 15,654. So by doing that prediction, we have basically predicted what should be the accrual amount. So I think we can go back to the presentation and see, how does this fare, when we think about, uh, what they have been doing historically, without AI. Right. So what you see here is, the actual amounts from October of 2017 all the way up to September of 2019, you know. So normally, what they were doing was that they were taking the last month's invoice amount as the accrual amount. So for the month of September, for example, in their normal course, they would have taken a value of 14,000 and posted that amount as the accrued amount in the month of September. However, our AI model predicted a value of 17,661, which is very close to the actual amount of 17,560. So imagine that, they would have actually posted a value of 3,500, which is, 25% less, onto their books by posting a value of 14,000, by looking just at the last month's invoice. But by using AI model, uh, they would have gotten a value of 17,661, which is far closer to, much closer to the actual amount of 17,560, And so imagine that, the amount booked to the books is more accurate, and therefore it gives you a much better situation of how much cash you really have in your business to use for your business activities. And on a similar note, we have predicted now the value of October. Of course, we are sitting in October, so we really don't know what the actual amount would be. But we have predicted that, it should be a value of 15,654, and it will have to be seen by the end of the month, what is the actual value and how does it fare. But the past 2 months, August and September, can clearly show that, in August we predicted a value much closer than, the July value, and in September we predicted a value much closer than the actual. So therefore I think this solution helps implement a much better cash flow analysis and cash flow that we have, and therefore helps improve the fiscal discipline. So this in a way completes the story of a perfect world that we imagined upfront, as part of our presentation. So we talked about, how we can have a perfect customer acquisition followed by efficiency in delivery and an improved fiscal discipline, with the help of artificial intelligence solution, and especially, how this also integrates into Business Central, and that's what we showed through two of the demonstrations here to you. So now so let's now come to the most important question, and that is, where can you really start? How do you really start if you're still not started on using artificial intelligence in your business? What's the starting point for you? So we have here laid down an AI strategy roadmap, which starts with a short assessment, which is just a 2-day assessment. So what we do here is that we sit with business owners of your company. So when we talk about business owner, they could be department owners or people who are owning the P&L, and we identify key business outcomes, which define your business. And these business outcomes could be both positive or negative outcomes. So sometimes it's not just that only positive outcomes define your business. Even negative outcomes could define your business. So imagine you are in a business which is run by people and you have high level of attrition. So for HR owner, employee attrition is a key business outcome. Even though it's a negative outcome, they are always working hard to reduce their employee attrition. So essentially in this 2-day study, we sit with the business owners, the P&L owners, and we identify key positive and negative outcomes. And we study the data, and we prepare an AI approach, how you could go about building predictive models and AI solutions to predict those key business outcomes. Now, this short assessment leads to a more detailed assessment or study, which is 2 weeks long, where we actually transform the data that we identified in the short assessment. We would study the causality, the cause and effects, the different inputs and outputs, and we also do some early stage modeling, to show some very preliminary results on those key business outcomes in this 2 weeks. So you can also say that we try to find the level of correlation between your inputs and outputs, and are able to show, that if you were to use these approaches, you could actually predict your business outcomes, and therefore, this could help you in your business, even take some corrective actions, to improve your business outcomes. And then I think finally we can pick one business outcome or one use case from those identified in the detailed study, and we could actually do the project, over a 2 month period, which would involve doing detailed transformation, feature engineering, training the models, validating the models on blinded data sets, and then finally deploying the model into your IT infrastructure and landscape, through some of the schemes or architecture that I earlier showed you, and once you have actually seen AI working within your IT landscape, I think you're all set then to, start implementing at an enterprise level for all your business outcomes. And then, you may not just restrict yourself to 3, 4, or 5 business outcomes, but all that would affect all of your departments. So in the end, I would just like to conclude that I think it's to be seen to believe in it. I believe in it very positively, because I have seen very positive results of using AI through my extensive experience, having done more than 25 assignments. And I think it's for you to now look for it. And so I think at that stage, I would conclude. And now we are open for Q&A. So you can actually ask your questions through the chat. We will also be making available a video recording. It will be uploaded on Olitech's YouTube channel. So the link will be shared with you in the coming days. So thank you very much. And now we are now open for questions. So I can see Rachit Goel trying to enter a question. Okay. So when should we use Python and Azure ML? Could you please give an example? I think there are different reasons why you would want to use Azure ML Studio or Python, and I can tell you what could those reasons be, So for example, if you don't want to pay for a transaction cost, and Azure ML Studio obviously, runs models and they charge by transactions, every time you make an API call to Azure ML, there's a cost to that, while, if you look at in a big picture, sometimes these costs are not substantial and they are actually quite reasonable. But, at times customers, or in a case of a business scenario, there could be millions and millions of such calls happening, in which case you might say that, oh, I don't want to pay for those ML calls, those API calls to Azure. In such cases, we could use an open source like a Python, implement it in your in-premise server and just expose a RESTful API, and then, that cost will not be there. But of course, building a model in Python would mean some extra effort, and so you would have to really do a cost benefit analysis, to do that. Another reason why we would want to use, let's say, Python over Azure is sometimes, if you are handling unstructured data, if you're handling, natural language processing kind of scenarios or image scenarios, Python may have some better models. You have the ability to use, things like, YOLO library, or you could use Vision API, but Vision API you can still use even if from Azure ML. But Python has some good deep learning models. I'm not saying Azure ML doesn't have. Azure ML also has got some good cognitive libraries to do deep learning. So you would actually have to pick and choose and see where you get the best results. you know but yeah, one key reason I would again reiterate is, if you don't want to pay transaction costs, and if you think transaction costs are going to be substantial, then you might want to use Python. Or else, in most cases or best cases, Azure ML is also very good, and could be cost effective depending on number of transactions you would forecast. Any more questions that I can? Jay, I just got your question. Are these AI very case specific? If you could elaborate that question a little bit, what do you mean by case specific? I think maybe I can be very precise in my response to that. Well, if you're trying to say that, Jay, if you're trying to say that, um, will AI be applicable only in very specific business scenarios or business cases, then I think you may not be right here. I think it all depends on your imagination, Jay, how you want to use AI. I'll just give you an example of a car marketplace, and we are currently engaged in this online car marketplace. They basically handle buying and selling of cars, used cars. And this customer of ours asked us, uh, can you do something about which can help our agents who are out there to do assessment of cars, and so in normal case, if you are just limited to, your structured data, you would not think about it. But what we ended up building for them was a mobile application, which allows the field agent to take a picture of the tire of the car and assess what is the life of the tire. So I'm just trying to, through this example, I just want to tell you that, the imagination, is unlimited. You can actually think of, as humans, what we would want to do, in business. If a field agent can go, and an expert field agent can go on the street and check the life of the tire by how much it has worn down, AI can also do that. So I would say if they are not very business case specific, yes, they could be precedents of high success rates in certain business cases, while there may be less success in other business cases. So Rachit, your question is just wondering if data residing in NAV for a mid-sized company is sufficient to train models. Um, well, most cases, yes. I can tell you the most aggressive scenario that I've seen here is where we just had 61 records, just 61 data points, and we were still able to build a predictive model with an accuracy of 67%. So again, I would not say that this is always possible, but in this case it was possible and we could do it. So certainly, if you're talking about NAV, and let's say we talk about a specific financial application, and we just talked about this particular use case, and you saw that this utility company, the data points we had were clear to you. We're talking about invoices from October 2017 till September of 2019, and we're talking about how many, 24 data points, and we could still predict what would be the accrual amount for this month and last month. So I would say, in many cases, we are able to do a good level of prediction with limited data. But yes, when we talk about unstructured data, when we talk about images, maybe even the even 100,000 records can sometimes, or images could turn out to be less, when we are doing unstructured data. But in structured data and with primitive ML models, I think generally speaking, we are able to achieve good results with mid-sized companies. The data for. All right, so I think I see that. Okay, Jay is asking one more question. Okay, all right, Jay. So this is actually Sanjeev, not Deepak. But thanks for your questions and your time. So we will conclude our session. In case you have any questions, feel free to connect with us. You can contact us in the US. You can contact Globy. That's his number. Or myself, and that's my number in India. Or you can simply write to info@olitech.com. So we look forward to working with you and taking you through a journey of AI in your business. Thank you so much. Goodbye, good day, good night.